I was like an ornery grandpa. Like I remember I just mostly would be like, everyone keep it down. I mean, I had like sensory issues and
Oh,
no
that's so funny.
communication skills. If there was a spider in my room, I would just leave. I'd go stand out in the hallway. I would just ask every passerby, "Are you afraid of spiders?" until someone would just come in and get it.
I hope I did that for you.
Today's episode is brought to you by the Hippocratic Collective. Check out our shows and content at hippocratic-collective.com. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this week's episode of Surgeon Interrupted. I'm your host, Frances May, and I absolutely cannot wait to introduce today's guest to you. Today, we have Jack joining us, and for an intro to Jack, Jaclyn Winkel is a workplace decoder, confidence builder, and soft skills strategist. She is a former D1 track and field athlete at Notre Dame, where she studied finance and peace studies, and this is where we first, of course, crossed paths in Breen Phillips Hall. She has her MBA from Northwestern's Kellogg School of Management. And Jack has deep experience in the business world, having spent most of her career at the Boston Consulting Group. She then worked across industries and org sizes from Teach for America, Rothy's, when it was a Series B startup, and Venture Capital, where she served as a chief of staff. She is the founder of Jack at Work, where she helps ambitious young professionals build the skills, credibility, and confidence that they need to thrive in the workplace. Welcome, Jack.
Thank you so much for having me, Frances May. I am so excited to be here, and I'm so glad that after so many years, our paths crossed again since the Notre Dame days.
Absolutely. No, we really appreciate having you here. I know that interestingly, you have a lot of connections to physicians, like with your family, your close friends and loved ones. So I think it's so cool. This is like where the magic happens, is when especially someone from the industry and business side with some knowledge of medicine can kind of like decode things for us, break them down for us, make them bite-sizable for docs.
Right, absolutely. And kind of a funny story. We can get more into this later, but my most viral piece of content to date on TikTok, it was about almost 2 years ago. I actually made after helping a physician who's very close to me prepare for his attending interviews. So he called me up. He had his attending interviews a few days away, and I was like, here's what I would do to prep in 30 minutes if I only had 30 minutes. And that video went super viral. So as you said, a lot of physicians near and dear to me. And I love translating what I've learned in the business world to what is helpful for them.
I love that. No, it's wonderful. I mean, I do find people underestimate physicians. Like that's kind of one of my central tenets is that like physicians, I think inherently are like a really smart and scrappy group of people. They just are known for having fewer street smarts, right? Like we can say that. I'm a physician. I don't know. I have no problem saying that. Like they do. They just have fewer street smarts. So we basically need, or if I can speak for myself,
Right.
what I needed was just a person who had the business skills, the industry background, which in my case was my husband. I just needed them to like really patiently, kindly explain it to me like once or twice. And then I got it. Then I was like, oh, great. What a superpower.
Right. Right. And it's you're such an intelligent group of people. The way I've thought about it is that from a certain age, your career path is quite set, which is why I'm so intrigued by your career path change and this second act career. Because like physicians, there's certain career fields where it is such a set career path. So you're obviously incredibly smart, have built up this amazing skill set, but are not used to thinking about your skill set as something that you can take elsewhere. And you haven't had to make those decisions necessarily for the longest time. Like, yes, you're deciding what med school, what field, what residency location, all of those things, but not necessarily thinking about yourself as I have this distinct set of skills that are applicable outside of medicine.
Exactly. Exactly. And I'm so glad, guys, we're here today to really get into this whole idea of second act careers. But I think that that's perfect because and I feel personally called out by that because absolutely, I feel like the last time, up until this year, the last time that I made a huge branch point decision about my career was when I was 18 and decided to apply to medical school. And yeah, when I was a third year medical student, a little bit of decision like, do I do ENT or not? But I mean, that decision was still pretty much already made given my outcomes research year at age 20. So
Right.
I totally agree with you. It also, because of that, a lot of us are really afraid of the unknown. I had to do a ton of work to get comfortable with the unknown, to say, okay, for the first time since 18, we are going to just not know what 3 years from now looks like or 5 years from now looks like. Because totally, when you commit to medical school, you do know broadly the number of years, what that training will entail. So I think a lot of discomfort with the unknown. But what is wonderful about second act careers, because you yourself, have had one, and I just think that there's something so universal for women in their 30s, especially, but really like high achieving professionals who go out on a limb or engage with this. So again, if any of you out there have ever like been counting down the days on the calendar, counting down the days till the end of a contract, and looked at your life trajectory and thought like, I can't do this for another 10 years, 5 years, 1 year, this episode is for you.
I love that.
So to really get into this concept of a second act career, these high achievers, high achieving professionals, especially in their 30s, but at any stage of life, they're leaving. They do it quietly, often, strategically. Less commonly, they do it dramatically. I'm probably in that camp. But people don't want to talk about it. They don't really want to look this in the eye. But I'd love to hear your take of like, what is driving the wave of second act careers?
Yeah. Oh, that's super interesting. I think a lot of people do have second act careers, but I think historically second act careers are almost a retirement era. It's like you're in your 60s, you're retiring, you now have, you want a little bit of income, but now you're pursuing your passions and you're blending passion and career in a way that you didn't in your, age 20 through 50. And I think that was the old second act career. I do think now people are seeing, I think a lot of it comes from exposure and largely social media. So I'm so excited that you've shared your story on social media, because now we're seeing that it's possible to not only pivot, I think more people are pivoting within their industry or in their function.
Right.
But I think more people are getting the energy to pivot to something totally different and realize I can pursue a career in this entirely different career path. So I think it's exposure is part of it. And it's just a more common thing now. I do think historically second act careers were truly like a retirement, post-retirement. And now we're just seeing that it's possible to transition in a way that we haven't before.
Wow, I find that, just to hit the nail on the head, that's so compelling. And it even helps me understand, I think, some of the backlash and vitriol that I've experienced leaving, because I totally agree. There's been this like thematic through line and this sense that people are like, you haven't put your time in yet and you can't leave. But it's so interesting because like I do think that when people are 60 years old or something like that, or say, like you mentioned, they're retired and they're doing like a second act career in that capacity, I've never seen backlash for it. Like, that's wonderful. People are like, go you. Like, that's awesome. Like, you put your time in. So it's funny that it's tied to this like antiquated notion of, I don't know, you do have to be miserable up through 50 or 60. Even one of my colleagues who left her practice in her 40s, there hasn't been even a fraction of the backlash that I've had at 33.
I've also found that people who speak out the most in general on social media, who speak out negatively, are people who are unhappy with where they are. I think that's a pretty general statement about social media and the comments people leave. And I'm sure you've seen a lot of those comments on your videos and your content. But I think the people who are unhappy are the people that speak out. So you're getting a lot more of that backlash because people are unhappy where they are and they didn't make those changes themselves. I think a lot of backlash against people doing second act careers are people who are unhappy with their career and they've stuck it out and hope that they can find happiness, and they just weren't brave enough to do what you did, or didn't take the steps that you took to find that passion and happiness. I think a lot of it comes from envy and unhappiness.
Yeah, I think that it would be helpful for us to know. So obviously my experience just 100% in medicine. I know that especially for like young women, they do not like the move from within clinical practice to outside of medicine.
Right.
In your industry though, how was like your second act career received, and how do you view it like with your peers? Is it more acceptable outside of medicine? That's my hypothesis.
I think your hypothesis is true. So it's a bit more context. My second act career for the people listening, I was in management consulting for a long time. So I've stayed largely in the business space as a management consulting, got my MBA, worked at some of those places you mentioned in between. Most recently was in venture capital as a chief of staff. And then I decided to start posting on social media. And I think that is where the most like pain in my pivot came from. And not necessarily backlash. People haven't said it to my face. but it's my own perceived backlash that I needed to get over. It was my own perception of people are going to think this is weird or ridiculous or silly that I'm posting on social media. And I think that was the biggest thing for me to get over. And I don't think I haven't really experienced backlash necessarily, like vocally to me. It was just a big thing for me to get over because a lot of people in very traditional corporate roles, like consulting, where it's very client facing, very formal, you're not expected. You do maintain an image of sorts that it's not expected to post on social media. And that's why I find my jacket work content to be such an interesting or unique voice in the space, because a lot of people who are coming from investment banking, management consulting, private equity, things like that, don't necessarily then post on social media. So that's where I think the biggest pivot comes from. And it's not, who knows if it's looked down upon. Perhaps people at my consulting firm see the content and they think, I can't believe this woman is posting on social media now. But I don't necessarily feel it directly. I think it was more of a perception. I think that in medicine, you've seen it a lot more vocally. And I'm sort of in the corporate space still because I'm giving advice on the corporate world. And then I'm in San Francisco, where I think people are very entrepreneurial. It's a very entrepreneurial environment. So when I'm saying that I started a coaching business, that I started my own coaching thing, people are on the whole quite excited, even if it's not a startup that's going to go raise money from a large VC out here. I think people are more open to entrepreneurship than in some of the places that I've worked previously.
Yeah, I love that. And of course, I do think like more digital natives out in the Bay Area and things like that. So that's great. I mean, again, no offense to medicine, but like they're the opposite end of that spectrum. Even adoption of more tech and AI in medicine, like it's a more antiquated industry. And so I think we just even see that reflected in, on a whole, the approach to social media use.
Absolutely. And I think there's fewer people leaving medicine, and there's even fewer people. It's a harder thing to leave. You've invested, there's that sunk cost fallacy of it. I'm sure that you struggled with quite a bit, that you've invested so much up into this point. But then I think there's a small subset leaving, and then there's an even smaller subset who are vocal about it like you are, that are paving the way and making it socially acceptable, or making it more acceptable for people to think they can leave.
Absolutely. I think that the sunk cost fallacy, it's very real. It's definitely one of the reasons why I didn't revisit my decision for my whole 20s. Like I'm dutiful. It's not a question of work ethic. So I just like showed up, and kind of pure momentum carried me through my 20s. But I do think that with the sunk cost fallacy, the most freeing thing has just been being like, okay, well, I love this quote. I always like to relate it back to a quote. And there's this quote that says, if anyone's going to walk into your life and magically make your life better, that person's always going to be you.
I love that.
And I do find that to be really true. Like, sure, sunk cost fallacy, but at what point do you cut your losses? Like, to me, I can either give up my whole life, or I feel like I really shifted the narrative internally to like, I put 33 years towards this. Guess what? I mean, I think that now that I talk through it out loud, I'm reminded of how people sometimes divorce after 10 years. And they say sometimes, they're like, look, that's not a failure. Being married for 10 years is kind of a success, and I'm willing to, I'm just moving on to a new chapter in my life. And that's honestly how I feel about this. Like, a 13-year relationship with medicine is like not a failure by any means. I don't think it's a moral failure or a personal or professional failure. I'm just moving on.
And that comes back to something we were saying earlier about the transferable skills and the skills that you've built up as a physician. You've built up so many things by the time you're 33, and you've been practicing for several years, residency, all of this, that it really isn't a loss. And I do think people do get caught up in the sunk cost fallacy. And if you reframe it to think about, I've spent all this time building up an amazing skill set, amazing network, amazing group of people who support me, that I can definitely pivot to something else.
Yeah, I love that. And I want to kind of quote back to you. This is something that you've shared as part of like your ethos and really the jacket work approach, which is that across like all of the roles that you've had and across the roles of professionals that you've worked with, you have noticed the same patterns over and over again. No matter the company or title, the people who rise the fastest are not always the smartest, but they're the ones who master a core set of skills.
100%. That is largely what led to me starting Jacket Work. Was I struggled as an associate when I was at BCG. I felt like I had no idea what I was doing. I did have no idea what I was doing at times. And I also felt like I was the only one struggling with these certain things. And then things started to click. I got quite good at, and spiky, as they would say, at spikes in certain things. And then when I became a project leader and then a coach to other teams, I started to realize that all of the associates, nearly all of them, were struggling with those same things. And that those things are the things that make a difference and that span consulting. I was at Teach for America for a while, Rothy's, really every space I've been in. Then we get over to the medical side of it, working with people that are close to me who call me to ask for advice on how to do these things. They really are a core set of skills that you build over time, and sometimes they're painful to learn, but they're applicable in every single industry and function.
Yeah, I love that. Again, I think especially for all of us in medicine, we're so like formulaic, very like, textbook learning heavy. And I do feel like by distilling these things down into bite-sized pieces and also really spelled out for us, that's the recipe for success. So in terms of this core set of skills, how much of those do you think that people in medicine like naturally get through medical training, or how much of it is something that might sound more new to us? Whether that's theoretically new to us or if just the vocabulary is new. Because part of it is that if it's not medical lingo, sometimes you just need to be able to put words to it. And then you say, that makes perfect sense. I've seen that phenomenon before. I can utilize that.
I think a lot of the mindsets that I find to be super valuable that take people to a successful career but take some time to learn. I find that physicians have a lot of those underlying mindsets, but I find that there's a gap in translating like your own skills and the things that you've learned and developed into the corporate world or into the business world. So some of it is the language of the business world. Some of it is just totally new. And there are things that you and I, we'd be totally talking past each other and I'd be like, oh my gosh, I have no idea how to do that. But I do think a lot of it is just kind of reframing the skills that you've built. There are things that are more technical that I don't think you're exposed to that are pretty core skills. And just differences in culture between the business world and working in medicine. So a few that come to mind are, like, I think that email communication is one of the biggest skills. And regardless of the use of AI, I still think you have to be an incredible prompter to get a really good email out of ChatGPT. Yep. But I think that written communication in that way is one of the most valuable skills. And I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think you're exposed to that type of the number of repetitions that you get in the business world in sending really crisp, good emails or the direct feedback on them. And so that would be one thing. I think another is learning to advocate for yourself, ask for negotiate raises, negotiate your contract if you get a new offer to go to a new practice, whatever it might be. I don't think that's necessarily taught, and maybe happens infrequently, so you're not getting the reps there. Another one that I think probably there might be cultural differences around is managing up and the dynamic that you have with your manager. The way I see it is that there's a bit more of a set relationship when you're a resident and you're the attending, and maybe more hierarchy or seniority. And I think that there's probably different ways that you would engage with your manager or your advisor than I would advise someone who is in the corporate world and trying to manage their manager. So there's probably some big differences there too. But I think that the underlying, like the work ethic, the curiosity, like the bedside manner, the ability to work with a vast array of people, there's so many underlying things there that you just need to tailor and figure out how to apply them elsewhere.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I want to break this down like piece by piece and kind of respond to all of them.
Because it was kind of a yes and no to your answer. It was like, yes, there are differences in language, but yes, there are differences in what you're taught and you build.
Yes, the differences in culture, that's especially with managing up, that's its own unique beast. I 1,000,000% agree with you. The old extremely vertical hierarchy that is practiced in medicine, it's like a little bit more reminiscent of military, although certainly that has its own differences. But I agree with you there. I think that what's so interesting about even things like bedside manner, while we do get formal education absolutely in like communication with patients, and I know a ton of physicians who have really excellent bedside manner, or even I would say my bedside manner was strong with patients, but it's such a different skill set to have interpersonal longitudinal relationships with colleagues, especially if their personalities really don't like mesh with yours. Like honestly, all of us, like truly, I would say the majority of doctors I know were competent at putting on their physician hat and walking into a room and having a positive interaction with a patient. That's just so different from interacting with staff, the rest of your team, your co-residents, your attendings, and things like that. For the first two that you mentioned, in terms of email, I totally agree with you. We're not getting reps. We're not getting reps. And also the emails just, we don't see like quality emailing modeled for us. You know, like as an intern, you get your schedule every week from a senior resident. Our senior resident used to actually you do a lot of email pranks, but like really in a horrible kind of toxic way. So if somebody, if a resident was like stayed logged in after morning round on a computer in the resident room, he would send out like emails to the whole department and be like, everyone come to my house for like a Mexican fiesta this weekend, or like would send out weird emails about like cats. Like it was just like very weird. And because like we didn't have like good relationships in the department, so it wasn't viewed as like, oh, that's like our old buddy sending weird emails again. He also would put attendings on them and stuff, to the point attendings would be like, is this a real, like, am I supposed to go to this person's house? I can't totally tell. That's what I think of when I think of email communication within like a residency department. That was kind of what it was limited to. So we're not getting reps there. And then certainly for contract negotiations, absolutely to your point, physicians don't routinely negotiate. And so when that really important conversation comes up, like say at the end of residency, negotiating a contract, most contracts are multiple years. You know, I signed a 3-year contract, so it wouldn't have come up again for several years. I think that that's a great spot for us to kind of talk about discrete ways to become a more powerful negotiator. This also is really important in the medicine landscape. Again, in contrast to yours, I think, where at least a lot of people I know in the business world, they do learn from a younger age. They learned as part of their MBA how to like pitch and package themselves and how to communicate effectively. Like, here are my skills. This is what I bring to the table. Whereas doctors, like, we never practice that. We don't practice that conversation. The truly like, what do I bring to the table? And not only that, but you have to also take into account the additional piece of, it's not considered quote unquote honorable to talk about money in medicine, I guess. And if a physician says like, I know my worth, I'm worth this, then people are like, that's so weird. I thought that you wanted to be a physician to help people, but I guess if you're just in it for the money, you know, okay, you've shown your hand. Like I mean, do you see any of that kind of cultural stuff like on your side in industry? I feel like when I've interacted with people in business and tech, like you're just allowed to say, this is what I know I'm worth. I have evidence to support that. And this is it.
I think I think on the whole, advocating for yourself is fantastic. It's the best thing you can do to say, I think I'm worth this amount. It's how you do it. It's how you package yourself. It's how you do it. I think whether you're in the business world or in a different industry, using data points is the most valuable way to do it, to say, okay, based on industry benchmarks or based on the value I provided, look, I've been tracking XYZ. This is what I provided. And this is also what the industry standard is for my position or people with my level of experience, whatever. And using that to set what your negotiation or your ask is the most valuable way to do it across. I think it sounds like it's more accepted to do in the business world than it is in medical. The way that I've talked with folks about it who have asked me on social media on, you know, my company is going through a hard time, there are layoffs. Should I ask for a raise? I think like I've been here, whatever the situation is, I think it's time for me to ask for a raise. The few ways I think about it are going back to like the very base of negotiations. There's this thing called BATNA, which is your best alternative to the negotiated agreement. I might have gotten that acronym wrong, but your BATNA is whatever your other option is. And so if you are at a company and you want to advocate for yourself and you want to negotiate for a higher salary, whatever it is, and you really don't think that you can get a job anywhere else, this is your end all be all. You don't want to get fired. You don't want them to, you know, react negatively. And you really at that point, you have no BATNA. Your alternative is zero. You'll probably be hesitant to do it and go about it in a different way or not even do it at all. Whereas if you are confident in your ability to get a job somewhere else and you think, okay, I'm going to ask for a raise because I know I'm worth X amount. And if I don't get this, if they react negatively, if there is some sort of retaliation against my request, is that a place I really want to be working? And is that maybe a sign I should go look elsewhere? In that case, even if you don't have an offer elsewhere, you have this confidence in your ability to go somewhere else. I think that that's when you are more likely to do it. So if you are in, for example, in your situation or in a medical, I don't know, you're interviewing for a different clinic and you are so worried about what would happen if you don't get that, you're probably not going to negotiate. But if you have other options, if there's other places you can go, other places you can interview, or you've been interviewing and you have another offer, you are much more likely to advocate for yourself. I think that's pretty standard across the board. And I know that what I'm about to say comes from a place of having options. And I know that the job market is quite tough right now. I think on the whole, if you go about asking for a raise and advocating for yourself in a way that is respectful and data-based and just communicated really well, and they respond negatively and folks talk about it in the way that we were just sort of referencing, then I think that, to me, that's not a place I want to be. That's not a place I want to build my career longer term if they're going to treat me advocating for myself that way. And that's the way I view it in medicine. I know it is hard to change jobs, locations. There's a lot of other factors that come into it. But on the whole, I think that when companies respond negatively to that, to you advocating for your worth, that indicates what the culture is, or people that I don't necessarily want to work with or be around.
That's a great point. I do think that, unfortunately for us, a lot of hospitals, a lot of medical institutions do feel that way. Like, it's not
Right.
to where there's so many medical institutions who view that favorably that, like, just avoid the ones who don't. It's like,
Right.
then you just might be saying, like, I don't know about practicing within like a hospital employed, or like maybe bigger group practice kind of position. But I think that what's interesting, because I always have to challenge my own fallacies, because as I'm listening to you talk, I'm like, well, doctors don't have as many options. They don't feel like they have as many options in terms of, like, there are only X number of ENT positions nationally. So unless you're going to make your own, like, there is a discrete number there, in a way where I do believe, like, I get it. And I've been there in terms of, like, okay, well, as a physician, like, our job landscape looks a lot different, especially like the more specialized you are, the fewer jobs there are. That's just true of like neuro-otologists who want to practice like their tiny lane, or even like laryngologists. Yeah. But that being said, I think that like the Korn Ferry program that I did, they taught me the language, growth mindset and scarcity mindset. I was 31 years old when I learned that language for the first time ever. And it totally, like, every time that I kind of gently challenged the scarcity mindset, quite a positive outcome and like a new opportunity, right, better than I'd ever conceived of, right, presented itself.
Right. And something that I think is unique to your field is that, and being a physician, is that you have such a strong network from your residency. And so you can tap into, when I was connecting with my friend a few weeks ago, she called me to help negotiate her offer she was switching clinics. And whenever I have advised people on gathering data points on what the market rate is for a particular role or function, it can be hard to find. Like, you're digging through LinkedIn, you're digging through different websites, you're trying to find friends who are in almost the exact type of role or experience. And it's very specific when you're trying to find those data points. And she called up a bunch of her friends from residency to connect with them and figure out what their offers were, what their signing bonuses were, those types of things, because you're in, at least in her residency, similar fields. A lot of them are in similar cost of living cities. And at that point, they have the same degree of experience. So I was like, oh, you have this like database of salaries and signing bonuses and contracts at your fingertips with like the people that are closest to you. And I think that residency bond is really tight, at least from what I've observed from the outside. Like, my friends who are in it, their closest friends are from residency. So you have this database at your fingertips with all the right kind of like degrees and factors to get the numbers that you need to advocate for yourself.
Yes, I love that. Like, it almost is controlled for your unique confounders, which include, like cost of living, years of experience and everything like that.
Role, all of that. Yeah. It was pretty neat to hear that. She just was like, boom, data points.
I love that. And like, how did she best reach out to them? She just already like had their cell phone numbers. Like, it was just more personal on that note. It wasn't like reach outs on LinkedIn or Doximity or anything like that.
Yeah, it was just personal connections. Yeah.
Very interesting. I guess that to anyone who does feel stuck in their job, because let's go back to like the scarcity mindset, which is so applicable in medicine. I think in particular, whether it means that they want to switch jobs, just find like a different role in clinical medicine versus leave clinical medicine, anything like that. What are some of your favorite like reframings and mindset shifts that could be applicable?
So I love the growth mindset that we talked about. I think that's probably one of the biggest ones. When I first started in consulting, I don't think I had that growth mindset. And it was like, okay, failure is bad, feedback is scary. And quickly changing those were some of the biggest mindset shifts. Feedback is a gift, regardless of if it's positive or negative. If it's like an area for development or a strength. I learned to love challenges. I think I've always liked challenges, but I learned to embrace and love challenges that I previously thought were unsolvable. So I think one of my favorite mantras or mindset shifts I developed over the past probably 10, 15 years is everything is figure outable. And if I were to write a book, I would title it that. But unfortunately, there's a book already titled Everything is Figure Outable. But I think that is just the most incredible mindset to have. And I truly feel like I can solve almost anything that comes my way now, which sounds crazy to say. But I would get a problem in consulting and say, there's no way I'm going to be able to solve this. And over time, it turned into, all right, let's figure this out. And I think I'm quite scrappy and quite good at learning how, and I take pride in being able to figure out almost anything, whether it's setting up a mic, whatever it is, any small or big thing, I am happy to try and figure it out. So that's probably one of the biggest ones, mindset shift wise. And then the third one that I think helps a lot with a career transition is control what you can. I remind myself of this all the time. And I sort of think this is a little bit of a take on let them theory, which is very popular right now, but I'm constantly reminding myself, control what you can. And so when you are in a job interview, as long as you've gone into it, and it helps with rejection, it helps with just peace of mind in general. If you're going into a job interview, you're going into a new industry, whatever you're doing, you're pivoting, you put in all the work that you can. You prep for the interview, you've done all your research, you show up at your best, you put your personality forward, you do all of the right things, and you don't get the job. Like, that's out of your hands at that point. I did all the right things I could do. That was not the right fit for me. That was not the right role for me, company, manager, whatever it is. I found that has led to some of the biggest blessings when I realized I put my best foot forward and this company wasn't the right fit. And I'm so glad that didn't work out. So just the growth mindset, everything is figure outable. I truly believe that. And then control what you can, I find to be the most helpful just mindsets to have as you're looking for a job. The fourth thing that I'll add in there, because I'm like, all my comments on the physician world are from the outside. I have not lived it. Mm-hmm. I do not know it personally, but I do think it's safe to say that physicians are high achievers and can be competitive. And so one of the biggest pitfalls I think people who are high achievers and competitive can fall into when they are looking for a new job is that they choose the shiny object. They think this will look really good or this will look really cool. And they fall into the trap of competing for something that they actually don't really want. But they're in this process and now they're interviewing and, it doesn't feel like it's the right fit, but it's this cool, shiny object. It's a cool company, cool role. And they see it through to the end. And then they get to the end and now they have the offer. And it's not actually something that they want, but they've spent all this time getting there. It looks really cool. It sounds really cool. And they might end up at that company or take the role or do whatever it is because it's the shiny object. And because they're driven by winning and getting the offer and whatever it is. And so I think reminding people that, like, to avoid shiny object syndrome when you are interviewing. If you're coming from like a high intensity job, you care about what's next on your resume, just really trying to think about what do I want and not getting distracted by the shiny objects.
Okay, well, shots fired at me because that's probably the best description of how I became an ENT. Like when it's like freeze frame, how did I get here? Oh,
right.
That's
like
crazy.
You've accepted the offer and then all of a sudden you're like, wait, did I actually want this? You were driven, you're competitive, you just got caught up in the process.
I've been read to filth. All right. Okay. Tough. But no, I love that. I think that's wonderful. I will say, like, shout out to one of my girlfriends from Notre Dame too, Jill. She has an MBA and she really taught me the saying, this or something better. which is a great
Yeah.
like reframe, really to your point about like, okay, I'm going out for a job that I really love. I want this so badly. Like I think all of us know what it's like in your bones to want something so badly,
Yes.
but the this or something better makes it survivable and more
100%.
palatable when you don't always get what you want, which is okay. And I can definitely echo what Jack said, that many of the biggest blessings of my life were like the something better. They weren't the this that I was like chasing after and tried to put all my eggs into.
Yep. Wow. I think about that all the time and firmly believe that as well.
You know, I think that for takeaways, like we went through a lot today. I'm very excited about this conversation. I feel like we could talk for just 10 hours about it. But, you know, if you're listening to us today and you feel like you're behind or starting over, you know, just know that you're not. Like you're starting ahead of where you were. No experience is wasted. I think that Jack and I, even if we make second act careers look easy, probably Jack more so than me, I'm like complaining loudly the whole time. I'm like, guys, what the heck? You know, but even if you see someone make it look easy, no, there's so much work, like the late nights, the studying the skills, this core set of skills for success, which definitely like they translate between industries. There's so much that goes into it. And like, there's no reason why that isn't accessible to you. I think of Mindy Kaling's book, you know, Why Not Me? And that obviously has brought her to the success that she's found today.
Yeah. Oh, all resonates.
Do you have any final words of wisdom that you'd like to leave us with today?
Yes, I have two that are related to this topic. The first one's a little bit longer, so bear with me for just a second. Something that I found really helpful when pivoting careers and moving to my second act career was something that a coach named Julia Starr shared with me. She's incredible. And she has a background in psychology. So all of the things that she teaches are rooted in why it works or why it doesn't work or why it happens. And she talked about the reference group and your reference group and your peer set, and how important reference groups were to us, you know, biologically and evolutionary, and how we survived. But now when you are pivoting careers, you need to change. What she shared with me is that you need to change your reference set. You need to change who you are comparing yourself to or with. Otherwise, you will continue to feel stuck or that you're not moving in the right direction or that you're not achieving enough. And my example here is when I was thinking of leaving my chief of staff role or just starting Jack at Work full time. To me, in my mind, my reference set that she called me out on was that I was still looking at myself compared to, and not necessarily comparing myself one-to-one, but I'd still think of myself as in the reference set of people I went to business school with, people who are at BCG. And as they are achieving that next promotion and they are becoming managing directors and partners, I'd go, wow, shoot, if I had stayed, I could be an MDP by now, whatever it is. And she said, your reference set is no longer that. Your reference set is coaches. Your reference set is content creators. That's who you need to think like. That's who you need to think about you're in the cohort of now. You need to change your reference set. For example, for you, you can't continue to compare yourself to ENTs that are practicing. And 5 years from now, you say, shoot, like they're doing this and, you know, they're achieving this and here I am. You're in an entirely different reference set now. So changing the reference set is super, super helpful. And then this quote, I keep it written on my wall. So I have to move my computer a little bit, but it says, okay, this is my favorite. Embarrassment is the cost of entry. If you aren't willing to look like a foolish beginner, you'll never become a graceful master. And so I constantly remind myself as I'm putting myself out there on social media, which at times is real, as you know, hard to do. Embarrassment is the cost of entry is probably my favorite quote to live by as I'm building something entirely new and something that's a lot more public.
I love that so much. I've read that quote and I love it. I definitely feel that way. Have you ever seen Succession on HBO?
I started it. I couldn't stick with it.
Oh, okay. Well, I just basically, you know, the family and they have their various flaws, but I actually really liked like one of the more powerful quotes from Shiv. It's the only daughter in the Succession family. Anyway, you know, somebody's yelling at her and I'm sure they did something wrong. I'm not, you know, that part notwithstanding, they're yelling at her. They're like, oh my God, you guys should be ashamed of yourselves. Like you guys should be embarrassed. Like you should be embarrassed for what you did. And she looks at him and she's like, we don't get embarrassed. And I found that very powerful. Like, and I do think that the people that I know who are effective, like talk about reference sets, the people who I know who I would want to hang with and who are effective people they don't get embarrassed. That's kind of like the quiet power that maybe we could all strive for.
Yep. 1000% agree. I try to remind myself that a lot.
I'm not saying don't have a conscience. I'm not saying like
Right.
move like the Roys, but
Right.
the embarrassment piece of it,
Yeah.
that's not the helpful. Having a conscience is different from just like getting embarrassed.
Right. It's not caring what people think when you're doing something that is true to you. Like I truly believe that you and I are both pursuing careers that align with our values and fit us really well. And so you have to get rid of that caring what people who don't matter to you think. You know, the person, I would say the person you went to college with and don't really talk to, but we have crossed paths again. We've reconnected. But I would say like all those people that you've, you know, met in different parts of your life that you think, oh, I wonder if they would think this is cringy or embarrassing. It's like, why do I care what they think? Why do I care what that person who isn't a core person in my life thinks about me? And so it's, to your point, it's having a conscience, but it's not getting embarrassed and not caring what the people who don't matter to you think.
Exactly. Just like embarrassment never drives the ship. Like that's fine.
No.
And your conscience should definitely be one of the voices that like helps guide a ship and things like that. But like embarrassment shouldn't. And I do examine my choices. I examine the way that I move because I don't want to be in the place or get the results that like embarrassment would take me to. That'd be a very different life from all the things that I appreciate about my life and like fought really hard for now. So absolutely. Yeah. I love that. Well, so much wisdom from Jack today. That is it for today's episode of Surgeon Interrupted. If there's anything that Jack said today that really hit home for you, then I hope you give yourself permission to explore that. There is just no medal for staying in the wrong career out of guilt or optics or embarrassment or any of those things. We don't let them drive the ship. And we're allowed to evolve. So thank you so much, Jack.
Thank you so much for having me. I feel like you and I could talk all day, so we got to cut us off. But thank you for having me. This was such an enjoyable conversation.
Absolutely. Look forward to continuing. Follow me on Instagram and TikTok at francismay.md. Check out our website, hippocratic-collective.com for more shows and content like this. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Surgeon Interrupted. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe, rate, and leave us a review. And if you're worried that leaving means starting over, let us remind you again, you're not starting from scratch, you're starting from experience.